I was working at a currency exchange in Tokyo when an American man walked up with a $100 bill. He slid it across the counter and said, "I need yen." I started processing the exchange. He watched me for a second, then said, "Wait, how much am I getting?" I showed him the rate on the screen. He looked confused. "That's it? $100 should be worth way more than that." I explained that the exchange rate was accurate. He shook his head. "No, I mean the dollar is the strongest currency. I should get more." I told him the yen actually had a different value system. Numbers look bigger, but the purchasing power is relative. He didn't want to hear it. "This feels like a scam," he said. I showed him the official rate on my computer. He still looked suspicious. "Well, in America, $100 goes a long way." I handed him his yen. He counted it twice, like I might have shorted him. Then he left, muttering about how expensive Japan was. That same week, a woman came in and asked if we accepted credit cards for currency exchange. I said no, cash only. She looked shocked. "What do you mean?" "Everyone takes cards." I explained that currency exchanges deal in physical money. She said, "But I don't carry cash. Can't you just Venmo me the yen?" I stared at her. She was serious. I told her Venmo doesn't work internationally, and we definitely couldn't send her yen through an app. She asked where the nearest ATM was. I pointed down the street. She sighed. "This is so inconvenient. Why doesn't Japan have better technology?" I didn't know what to say to that. Japan is one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. But she'd already walked away. Another customer asked me if Japanese money was real money or just for tourists. I blinked. "It's real money. It's the official currency of Japan." He said, "Yeah, but can you use it to buy actual things?" I said, "Yes, that's how currency works." He nodded slowly, still looking uncertain. "So it's not like monopoly money." I assured him it was legitimate legal tender. He seemed relieved. "Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure." He exchanged his dollars and left. I stood there wondering how someone could travel to another country and not understand that other countries have their own functioning economies. Then there was the guy who got upset because the yen bills were different sizes. He held up a 10,000 yen note next to a 1,000 yen note and said, "Why aren't these the same size? How am I supposed to keep these organized?" I explained that different denominations are different sizes to help people distinguish them, especially those with visual impairments. He said, "That's stupid. American bills are all the same size and we do fine." I didn't mention that many people criticize US currency for that exact reason. He shoved the bills in his wallet and walked out, still complaining. My friend works at a train station in Munich. She told me about an American tourist who missed his train and came to the counter, furious. He demanded to know why the train left early. My friend checked the schedule. The train left exactly on time. She showed him the departure time on his ticket. He said, "Yeah, 14:30. That's 2:30. She said, "Yes, and it's now 14:35. He stared at her. "But I got here at 2:32. She explained that when the departure time is 14:30, you need to be on the train before then, not arrive at the station at that time. He said, "That's ridiculous. Trains should wait a few minutes." She told him German trains run on precise schedules. He said, "This would never happen in America." My friend thought about Amtrak delays but didn't say anything. He bought a new ticket, complaining the whole time about how unreasonable Europe was. I worked at a car rental place in Ireland. An American couple rented a vehicle and came back 30 minutes later. The husband said the gas gauge was broken. I asked what was wrong. He said, "It says full, but we've been driving and it still says full." I looked at the gauge. It showed full because they'd literally just left. I explained that. He said, "No, I mean the numbers are wrong. It doesn't say how many gallons are in the tank." I realized the issue. The gauge shows full, half, or empty. It doesn't show gallons because we use liters here. He looked annoyed. "How am I supposed to know when to fill up?" I said, "When it gets close to empty." He said, but I need to know exactly how much gas I have. I suggested he check the owner's manual for tank capacity. He waved me off. This is too complicated. They returned the car the next day and took taxis everywhere. My sister worked at a hotel in Sweden. An American guest called the front desk at midnight, angry. He said, "It's freezing in my room. The heat is broken." My sister asked what temperature it was set to. He said, "I put it on 70, but it's not getting warm." She went to check the room. The thermostat was set to 70 degrees Celsius. The room was like a sauna. She explained that Sweden uses Celsius, not Fahrenheit. He said, "What's that?" She explained the metric system. He said, "Why don't you use normal temperatures?" She showed him how to convert it. 70 Fahrenheit is about 21 Celsius. He adjusted it. Then he asked, "Why would anyone use a system that makes no sense?" She said, "Most of the world uses Celsius." He said, "That doesn't make it right." The next morning, he complained at breakfast that his shower wasn't hot enough. He'd set it to 21 degrees Celsius. My sister had to explain temperature ranges all over again. A friend who works at a bike shop in Amsterdam told me about an American who wanted to rent a bike. She showed him the options. He asked, "How many miles per hour do these go?" She said, "They're regular bikes. It depends on how fast you pedal." He said, "Yeah, but what's the average?" She said, "Maybe 15 to 20 kilometers per hour." He looked confused. "What's that in miles?" She said, "About 10 to 12 miles per hour." He said, "That's so slow." She explained that Amsterdam is a small city, and bikes are for getting around town, not racing. He said, "In America, we measure things properly." She just smiled. He rented the bike. An hour later, he came back and said, "Your bike paths don't make sense. Why are they so narrow?" She explained that they're designed for bikes, not cars. He said, "But what if I want to go faster?" She said, "Then don't bike in a city center." He returned the bike early and left a review saying Amsterdam was anti-bike. I was at a grocery store in France. An American woman was in the produce section looking confused. She asked an employee, "How much does this weigh?" She was holding a bag of apples. The employee said, "You have to weigh it yourself at the scale." The woman said, "But it doesn't say pounds." The employee explained that France uses kilograms. The woman said, "I don't know how many kilograms I need." The employee asked how many apples she wanted. The woman said, "Like 2 pounds worth." The employee did the conversion and helped her weigh the right amount. The woman thanked her, but then said, "Why doesn't France just use pounds? It's easier." The employee said, "The whole world except America uses metric." The woman said, "Well, maybe the world is doing it wrong." My cousin worked at a pharmacy in Spain. An American man came in asking for medicine. He showed her a prescription from the US. She said they couldn't fill foreign prescriptions. He said, "Why not? It's medicine." She explained that prescriptions need to be from a Spanish doctor. He got upset. "That's stupid. Medicine is medicine." She suggested he see a local doctor. He said, "I'm only here for a week. I don't have time for that." She apologized but said there was nothing she could do. He asked, "Can I just buy it without a prescription?" She said, "Not if it requires one." He left, frustrated. Later, my cousin found out he'd tried 3 other pharmacies with the same result. Eventually, he went to a doctor, got a local prescription, and came back. He said, "That was the biggest waste of time. In America, I just show my prescription and get my medicine." My cousin said, "In Spain, we follow Spanish rules." I worked at a restaurant in Paris. An American couple sat down and asked for the menu in English. I gave them one. They looked it over. The man said, "Do you have burgers?" I said no. We were a traditional French bistro. He said, "What about chicken fingers?" I said no. He looked at the menu again. "This is all fancy stuff. Don't you have normal food?" I suggested the steak frites. He said, "What's that?" I explained it was steak and fries. He said, "Oh, why didn't you just say that?" They ordered. When the food came, He asked for ketchup. I brought some. He dumped it all over the steak. The chef saw it from the kitchen. He looked personally offended. After they left, he said, "Never again." Another time, a woman came in and ordered a salad. When I brought it, she said, "This is tiny. Is this an appetizer?" I said no. It was the entree salad. She said, "This wouldn't even fill up my kid." I explained that, in France, portions are smaller and people don't usually overeat. She said, "In America, we get our money's worth." She ate the salad in 4 bites and asked if we had free refills. I said no. She looked disappointed. "Not even bread?" I brought her bread. She ate 3 baskets. Then she asked for the check and said, "I'm still hungry. This place is a rip-off." My friend worked at a coffee shop in Italy. An American ordered a latte. She made it. He took a sip and said, "This is all milk." "Where's the coffee?" She explained that a latte is mostly steamed milk with a shot of espresso. He said, "In America, lattes have way more coffee." She said, "This is how we make them in Italy." He said, "Well, can you add more espresso?" She said she could, but it would be an extra charge. He said, "You're charging me to add coffee to my coffee?" She said, "You're asking for a double shot." He paid the extra euro, but he wasn't happy. "Italy is so stingy with coffee," he said. My friend didn't mention that Italy literally invented espresso. I was eating at a restaurant in Japan. An American family sat at the table next to me. When the food came, they all started eating immediately. I noticed the Japanese diners around us pausing, saying "itadakimasu" before eating. The American kids were loud, pointing at things, talking over each other. Their parents didn't seem to notice how quiet everyone else was. At one point, the dad stuck his chopsticks straight up in his rice bowl while he drank his beer. An older Japanese man at the next table looked away quickly. That's a funeral ritual in Japan. Standing chopsticks in rice is associated with death. The American family had no idea. When they finished, they left their plates messy and walked out. I saw the server sigh as she cleaned up after them. My roommate worked at a pizzeria in Rome. An American tourist ordered a pizza and asked for pineapple. My roommate said, "We don't have pineapple." The tourist said, "What kind of pizza place doesn't have pineapple?" My roommate said, "An Italian one." The tourist laughed. "Come on, Hawaiian pizza is everywhere." My roommate said, "Not in Italy." The tourist couldn't believe it. "You're telling me Italy, the country that invented pizza, doesn't serve Hawaiian pizza?" My roommate said, "Correct." The tourist said, "That's insane." He ordered a margarita instead. When it came, he looked at it and said, "This is so plain. Where's all the toppings?" My roommate explained that margarita is a classic pizza with tomato, mozzarella, and basil. The tourist said, "In America, we load our pizzas with stuff." My roommate said, "In Italy, we focus on quality ingredients." The tourist ate it, but said it was boring. My roommate told me she wanted to ban him from the restaurant. A friend of mine worked at a sushi restaurant in Tokyo. An American man ordered sushi and asked for a fork. The server brought him one. He picked up a piece of sushi with the fork, dipped it in soy sauce until it was soaked, and ate it. The server cringed. He did this with every piece. Then he mixed wasabi directly into his soy sauce, creating a murky green puddle. In Japan, you're supposed to put a tiny bit of wasabi on the sushi itself, not mix it into the soy sauce. But he didn't know that. He also ate the ginger between every piece of sushi, which is fine, but then he ate a huge clump of it all at once and started coughing. The server brought him water. He recovered and said, "Japanese food is intense." The server just nodded. I was at a pub in Dublin. An American guy ordered a Guinness. When it came, he took a sip and said, "This tastes flat." The bartender said, "It's supposed to be smooth, not fizzy." The guy said, "In America, beer has carbonation." The bartender said, "This is a stout. It's creamy." The guy said, "I don't like it." He sent it back and ordered a Budweiser. The bartender gave him a look, but poured it. The guy drank it and said, "Now that's a real beer." Every Irish person in the pub heard him. The bartender told me later, "I wanted to throw him out." I was giving a tour at a castle in Scotland. An American woman asked, "Did people really live here?" I said yes, for centuries. She said, "Like, with no electricity or plumbing?" I said, "That's correct. Those didn't exist back then." She said, "How did they survive?" I explained they used candles, fireplaces, and chamber pots. She looked horrified. "That's disgusting." I said, "It was normal for the time." She said, "I could never do that." I said, "Good thing you live in the 21st century." She didn't catch the sarcasm. Later, she asked if the castle had Wi-Fi. I said no. She said, "How am I supposed to post pictures?" I suggested she wait until she got back to her hotel. She looked at me like I'd suggested she wait a year. A teacher friend in Germany told me about an American exchange student who asked why Germans felt so guilty about World War II. My friend said, "Because of the Holocaust and the millions of people who died." The student said, "But that was so long ago. Why don't they just move on?" My friend explained that Germany takes historical responsibility seriously and teaches it extensively in schools. The student said, "In America, we don't dwell on the past like that." My friend said, "That's a different approach." The student said, "Yeah, like, we had slavery, but we're over it now." My friend didn't even know where to start with that one. I worked at a museum in Athens. An American family came through. The dad kept comparing everything to the Roman Empire. "So this is from when Rome controlled Greece, right?" I said, "Actually, this predates Roman occupation. Ancient Greece was its own civilization." He said, "But Rome conquered everyone." I said, "Eventually, yes, but Greek culture came first and influenced Rome." He said, "That doesn't sound right. Rome was the biggest empire." I showed him the dates on the exhibits. He still looked skeptical. His son asked, "Dad, if Greece came first, why isn't Greek more important than Latin?" The dad said, "Good question." I said, "Greek is extremely important. Many English words come from Greek." The dad said, "I thought they came from Latin." I gave up. My sister studied abroad in London. She told me about an American classmate who asked if Big Ben was named after a person named Ben. The professor said, "It's actually named after Benjamin Hall, who oversaw its construction." The student said, "Oh, so it's been there since like the 1900s?" The professor said, "It was completed in 1859. The student said, "Wow, that's old." The professor said, "For America, perhaps." The student didn't get the implication. Later, the same student asked if people in London still follow the Queen around. The professor said, "No, the royal family doesn't just walk around the city." The student seemed disappointed. "I thought we'd see her." The professor said, "She lives in a palace, not on the street." I worked at a tourist info desk in Amsterdam. An American asked me, "Is Anne Frank still alive?" I paused. "No, she died in 1945 in a concentration camp." He said, "Oh, I thought maybe she survived." I said, "No, she was killed during the Holocaust." He said, "That's sad. Is her house still here?" I said, "Yes, it's a museum." He said, "Cool, I'll check it out." Then he asked, "So did Amsterdam get bombed a lot during World War II?" I said, "The Netherlands was occupied by Germany, but Amsterdam itself wasn't heavily bombed." He said, "Lucky." I didn't know how to respond to that. He left, and I sat there thinking about how casually people talk about history they don't fully understand. A friend who works at a bookstore in Paris told me about an American who asked if they sold books about the French war. She said, "Which one?" He said, "You know, the big one." She said, "World War I? World War II?" He said, "No, the one where France fought America." She said, Do you mean the American Revolution? France was allied with America. He said, no, I'm pretty sure we fought France. She said, maybe you're thinking of the Quasi-War. That was a brief naval conflict in the late 1700s. He said, I don't know. I just know we had a war. She showed him some history books. He didn't buy any. He said, I'll just Google it. I was at a cafe in Vienna. An American tourist asked the barista if Vienna was in Germany. The barista said, no, Austria. The tourist said, what's the difference? The barista said, they're two different countries. The tourist said, but you speak German. The barista said, yes, German is spoken in multiple countries. The tourist said, so it's like how people in America and Canada both speak English? The barista said, similar, yes. The tourist said, okay, but which one is more important, Germany or Austria? The barista said, they're both important. The tourist said, but Germany has a bigger economy, right? The barista said, yes. The tourist said, so Austria is like Germany's little brother. The barista just made his coffee and didn't respond. My cousin worked at a train station in Brussels. An American asked her if people in Belgium spoke Belgian. She said, there's no such language. We speak Dutch, French, and German. The tourist said, so what do you speak? She said, I speak Dutch and French. He said, why two languages? She said, because Belgium has different linguistic regions. He said, that's confusing. She said, not if you grow up here. He said, in America, everyone speaks English. She said, not everyone. He looked surprised. Who doesn't speak English in America? She said, many immigrants speak other languages. He said, yeah, but English is the main one. She said, Belgium doesn't have one main language. It's multilingual. He said, that sounds complicated. She said, it's normal for us. I used to think these stories were rare exceptions. Then I started asking around. Turns out, almost everyone who works with tourists has a collection of these moments, and they keep happening. One of my favorites came from a guy who worked at a gelato shop in Florence. An American customer ordered pistachio gelato. When he brought it, she said, this isn't green enough. He said, what? She said, pistachio ice cream is supposed to be bright green. This looks beige. He explained that real pistachio gelato is naturally a pale color. Bright green means artificial coloring. She said, I don't care. It doesn't look right. She asked for a refund. He gave it to her. She left and went to the shop next door, which used food coloring. She came back past his shop 10 minutes later with a bright green cone, looking satisfied. He just shook his head. Another story I love is from a hotel manager in Switzerland. An American guest called the front desk at 3 a.m., angry. Why is there a cowbell ringing outside my window? The manager explained that there were cows in the pasture behind the hotel and some wore bells. The guest said, can you make them stop? The manager said, they're cows. They're in a field. The guest said, but I'm trying to sleep. The manager said, I can't control livestock. The guest said, this is unacceptable. In America, we don't have cows near hotels. The manager said, you're in the Swiss Alps. Cows are part of the landscape. The guest demanded a different room. The manager moved him to the other side of the building. He still left a bad review about the livestock noise pollution. Here's the thing. Traveling means accepting that other places work differently. Different languages, different customs, different systems. But some people expect the world to adapt to them instead of the other way around. I'm not saying every American tourist is like this. Most are curious, respectful, and excited to learn. But the ones who aren't? They're memorable, and their stories spread. Every week, someone tells me a new one. A tourist confused about why Iceland doesn't have palm trees. A traveler upset that Switzerland is too expensive. Someone baffled that Wales has its own language. The stories never end. So if you work in tourism, you already know what I'm talking about. And if you're planning to travel, remember that the world doesn't revolve around your home country. Every place has its own way of doing things, and that's not a problem. It's the whole point of traveling. Anyway, these stories are real. I didn't make them up. And honestly, there are hundreds more where these came from. Maybe I'll tell